But first of all, thank you again for allowing me to be here, Joe. I'm super delighted to be with all of you this morning. And in full disclosure, there's a reason as to why Joe and I don't have coffee cups in front of us this morning. And that is because today in the Jewish faith is a fast day, which is ironic because of the fact that here I am talking about productivity, and I know that I'm operating on a limited battery this morning. Okay, I'm not going to get into all the history and why it's a fast day today, but nonetheless, it's something that kind of gives me more context and pause as we talk about a topic that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts. How do we become more productive? As I was listening, I didn't hear everybody, but I was listening to everybody who I did get a chance to hear talk about their businesses. I'm sure all of us feel that while we're doing great work, and hopefully we'll continue to do great work, we'd love to be able to do more great work. But there's only 24 hours in a day, there's only a limit to how much energy we have. And so what I thought I would ask you to do, I'm actually a former teacher and school principal, converted into executive and leadership coach. So I like to integrate educational strategies into how I interact with people. And I'd like to introduce you very quickly to a strategy called a think, pair, share. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of it. You may have seen it used by your teachers once upon a time, although it's more of a recent concept in cooperative learning. Basically it means you think about a question, you pair with the person next to you to briefly discuss it, and then you share it with the group. And so here's the question. And again, I'm going to ask you, especially for the introverts in the room like myself, who like to think and prefer to think perhaps more than speak and share, what is your greatest impediment in the area of productivity? That's the question. What sort of gets in your way the most when it relates to being more productive? Think about it for 45 to 60 seconds. I'll let you know when you're free to talk to the person next to you. And I do want to get some quick feedback before I move into the topic, because I'd like to be able to tailor my comments to the issues that are top of mind for you. Again, the biggest impediments to your own productivity. When you feel you're ready, find the person closest to you. I think in this case, it may just be the two of you would be best connecting, and then over here as well. Discuss what you thought of, and then come up with something that you would agree represents your group. I don't know that I'll be able to hear from everyone because our time is tight, but I'd like to get at least some feedback from the group.
Do the three of us, or?
I think you have. It's an even number. I think if you go this way, this way, this way, this way, you're good. Yeah, there's a pair for everyone.
Barbara. So what do you find distracting?
It's distracting. It's hard to say, but it's trying to. I have a small firm. I'm getting a lot of together to work together in conjunction.
Working with other people?
Yeah, my own firm.
Collaboration going on.
30 seconds.
I gotta give this thought.
Again, you want to share with each other and decide which one you feel is strongest to present.
Affecting myself, because that's a different ballgame. What affects probably one person is overwhelmed with too much to do.
15 seconds.
And as a result, it affects everybody.
Right, so it kind of brings everybody down.
Question.
Pressure is on, yes.
Like very offensive.
Final seconds, final thoughts. What I'm looking for our purposes in particular are responses that are maybe a little bit more universal in nature. So if you have something that's very, very personal or industry specific that you think may not, quote, scale to the rest of the group, that may not be the best answer for the moment. But if anyone has something that you feel fits that criteria and would like to share, I'll take just a few. I can't get to everybody, but I'm glad at least we facilitated more conversation this morning. Did you want to say something?
Of course.
Go ahead.
I'm not the introvert.
I don't know you yet, so I don't know that it's of course.
So I'm a CPA, as I said before. I have staff. I have
Okay.
10 accountants and a couple of offices, and our business is driven deadline to deadline. So how do you motivate employees to be able to do what they're supposed to do? In other words, I would love for all of them to be duplicates of myself.
Yep.
Not that I'm a great whatever, but I guess we all think we are. Right.
So the biggest impediment to productivity is
Motivating employees.
limited staff motivation.
Right.
People feeling, you didn't use the word engagement, but not as motivated as you'd like them to be to get the work done.
That's right.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Time. Okay.
We both came up with that together. We both said.
How are you
something,
defining that?
His is because of logistics, and mine is because of my child.
Okay.
You don't have time to do the things you do.
So you have other things pulling on your time.
Yeah, and he has to drive from out into the city. So
Time and travel. Okay. Anyone else?
Distractions.
Okay. How do you define those? What would be an example?
So, a lot of times I'll, come into the office hot, looking to get something done.
Uh-huh.
Just get it off my plate.
I talk to you. Is that what you're about to say? Yeah.
Stephanie has something to say, or there's an email waiting for me that completely takes me away from that drive I came to the office with.
Got it.
And that can spawn into another thing that I forgot to do that ties in with that thing.
So you two work together?
Yeah, we work
Okay,
together.
I missed that part of it. Okay, great. Actually, in many ways, you just saved me a little bit, because a lot of where we're going to go with it does relate to things that are within our locus of control. In other words, to a degree, travel is not within your locus of control. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We could potentially talk about how do you make your travel time more productive, right? It's a bit of a catch-22, because I don't really want to be in the business of suggesting distracted activity during driving. I do listen to audiobooks, things like that. Oftentimes people will make phone calls. In fact, a little hack that I just got was you can get 180s that have Bluetooth. So I can listen to audiobooks while traveling in cold weather or walking in cold weather as you're making your way around. But, having distractions, whether they're externally imposed or frankly internally imposed, right? Our smartphones could be huge distractions for us. And it's not always because someone's trying to get our attention. Sometimes we're looking to see who's posting or what's out there, or what, check our feeds and whatnot. Sometimes we just are having a hard time staying focused, and so we go online to do a little bit of web surfing or find things that maybe are a little bit less cognitively demanding, and as a result we get less done. So I'd like to spend just a little time, because I know I don't have a lot, and give me please, Joe, a 5-minute warning so that I know when I need to wrap up, of some things that hopefully will have universal appeal to everybody as it relates to better using our time. And one of them has to do with setting goals. Okay, I think it's pretty straightforward. We all know the idea that we need to be setting goals. I don't know how many people do or do not. Just out of curiosity, how many of you, I don't know how well you know each other, and I don't want to put anyone in an uncomfortable spot, but how many of you on a regular basis set goals, both macro level, what we might call big picture goals, right? There was somewhat the long term, where do I really want to go with a project, my business, my future career, whatever those might look like, and then specifically the more day-to-day type goals that will advance my needs and bring me closer to my destination. How many of you use goal setting as a regular part of your professional practice? Okay, so doing that alone is huge. It's about 50% of the room, which is good. Okay, hopefully it'll become 100%. But even within that 50%, are there ways that we could become even sharper? And one of the things we need to talk about is making the goals smart, and specifically specific and measurable. The more that goals are fuzzy, the harder they are to actualize. The more that they are outcome related, the harder they are to actualize. You want them to, instead of becoming outcome related, you want it to be process related. So instead of focusing on, I want to lose 20 pounds, it's, I will change my diet, exercise more frequently. Whatever those behaviors are that we can control and we can be specific and measure, those will ultimately, logic tells us, those will ultimately bring us closer to that goal of losing weight. But we can't ultimately, I want to be promoted, right? I want to land, X number of clients. We don't know that we can actually do that, but what we can do are control the steps that lead to the closing of clients if we can predict that those will typically translate one to the next. How many phone calls we're making, how many meetings we're scheduling, how many follow-ups we engage with, how much posting online we feel is appropriate. Let's say, for example, building our LinkedIn presence. And by the way, I'd love to connect with everybody when we're done. You probably know the way you can do it with your QR scanner. If not, I'll show you. But the idea is, how do I take the steps, and what are those steps? At what time frame? That's the T of SMART. what time frame do I attach to my goals to ensure that they're happening? And I'm keeping myself accountable. And one thing that I would encourage you in general to do, and as an invert and somebody who introvert, excuse me, and someone who oftentimes works alone in my work, it's a little bit harder to do, having conversation with other people, for example, about your goals, for example, about your objectives, what you want to accomplish, even if the person adds no value. It's interesting. Even if the person literally is a coffee cup or a light bulb or a rubber ducky, so to speak. I know, and it can sound really awkward, but you could literally have a conversation with your coffee cup, and that will actually bring you greater clarity and insight. The very act of speaking aloud what's top of mind will bring you to greater clarity about what needs to happen. Obviously, if you talk to another person and they're skilled in asking questions, like coaches and others who know what to ask, who will bring out the very best, it's only going to exponentially enhance your productivity further. So in one very quick fell swoop, goal setting is an important piece that I would encourage you to consider. I have a prompt that I have on my phone that every day reminds me to set my daily goals. I have one in the evening as well to review my goals and to set them for the next day. Sometimes it's not a perfect process, right? It's really based on how much I'm going to hold myself accountable. But if you have somebody else that you could share your goals with, and then that person can share their goals with you, that process alone will hold you more accountable and will likely make it happen. Another piece. We live in an era that glorifies something called multitasking. If I can get multiple things done at the same time, I'm washing the dishes and having a conversation and and cleaning the car and filling out my tax return all at one time, right? We imagine, wouldn't it be great if we could, since we'd have limitations in time. But the reality is, and research makes it very clear, that if we want to get real things done, we need to focus on specific activities and block out others. And that may include hanging a sign like you have in a hotel, hanging a sign over your door that says, do not disturb, or letting people know that from this time to this time you're not available. I wonder if AutoZone would ever sponsor these, right? I'm in the zone, and I can hang it over your workplace. You can't be bothered. Because when you do that, you get so much more done than if you allow emails to interrupt you. And we all do it. If you have little pingings that goes on with your smartphone or with your computer every time an email comes through, that ultimately is to your detriment. If people know that you, Brian Tracy, you might be familiar with him, he talks about check your emails twice a day. I think he says 11 and 4, something like this. Twice a day. And you spend your time catching up on emails. Another term for it is batching. I batch all my email activity at one time. If you're a writer, you batch all of your writing at a different time. If you're engaging with clients, do all your client calls. I have one client I work with, his CEO, raises money for hedge funds. So he has call blocks. And he focuses during those times exclusively on that activity. He's not talking to the COO, he's not engaging in other things, he's not checking his phone, at least he's not supposed to be. Right? He's supposed to be making his calls because that's the rainmaking process of his business. That's what ultimately drives sales. So he needs to be uber focused on making that happen. Another thing to do, depending of course on your schedule, is if you can get into the office early or work from home early when people are relatively not busy, when others are not vying for your attention, that's a great time to work. Your mind is clear, your energy is highest, and so being strategic about your energy levels, right? I even wrote a post on my way in on the bus this morning about how I'm going to manage my energy today when I'm fasting. But we all know that there are ebbs and flows in our energy, besides for exercise, and besides for having good healthy snacks at our disposal and drinking lots of water. All those are super good. Okay, but besides for that, you know you're going to have sort of that ebb and flow on your energy level. And so if you can time it right, or if your body is giving you some signs, and you say, you know what, I've been saving this low energy project, now is a good time for me to do it. I need to take care of some paperwork. Obviously I don't want to mess up the paperwork, but it doesn't demand the same level of energy as engaging with clients, or having meetings, or getting on calls or things like that. That would be another way to really make more productive. It's at the same time, you're not doing something different on your calendar necessarily, but you're thinking about your time differently. Not all time was created equal. That's an important thing to think about. Not every moment of my day was created equal. Not all levels of energy. I'm not the same person at every moment of the day. I bring different levels at different times. Sometimes you need to summon, right? You probably feel that. Even when I walk in, as somebody who just likes to mind his own business. I walk into a room, I'm going to present to somebody else. I need to summon energy to be able to come and speak to you. And as an introvert, that actually drains my energy, as opposed to an extrovert who's just recharging all the time. But that's a different conversation. The point is, you sometimes have to do that, but if your regular flow you don't, you know probably around this time of day I get a little bit tired. That would be a good time to do this. But when I'm supercharged and ready to roll, maybe right after lunch, if you don't overdo it, you know, you have a nice brisk walk and you're outside and you're feeling really revived after a morning, also a great time to dive in and do something more involved. Okay? And to have one other thing I would mention before I get into the last point, something called your most important tasks. Think of the 80-20 rule. There's some different variations of this. If I got these 3 big things done today, that would make my day feel successful in and of itself. What are those things? If you could answer that question every day, what are the 3 MITs, most important things that I could do today that would really qualify my day as a resounding success? You'll still have time for other stuff. Right? One of the books, the Personal MBA, is a book I would encourage all of you to read or listen to. Lots of great nuggets in there. He talks about this idea. He says you got a 3-10-20 rule. The 3 is the 3 big things, right? The MITs. He said they would take 20 minutes or more typically to do. You can only do 3 of them on a day. That's his rule. And then you can leave time for 10 smaller things. On average, you know, everybody's a little bit different, but it gives you a sense. What are my big items? What are some smaller tasks? And you plan your day out accordingly. And then lastly, right, I don't know how big your operations are, how many people are on your team, but we all know that we try to get as much done as for ourselves, by ourselves, for a variety of reasons. Some of us like control. Some of us feel we don't have the right people on staff. Some of us just aren't that trusting in nature. Some of us feel like it just takes too much time, right? If I'm going to go ahead and delegate something and I'm going to spend all this time standing over you and watching you do it, and you're going to make all these mistakes, and then I'm going to bring it back, and is it worth it? We ask ourselves lots of questions like this. And I'm not here to go through what is usually a much longer presentation on the topic of delegation. But in its essence, if we can think about who we can delegate to, and delegation doesn't always have to include the people in our office on a given day. We could look at Upwork or Fiverr or other places where you could find virtual assistants, very inexpensive in many cases, that could do a lot of the simple work that you don't have the time presently to do. Think about what are the tasks that you could give to somebody else where you could anticipate 80% or more proficiency. Being mindful of the fact that if you follow the teachings of Ken Blanchard and others, delegation is actually the 4th of a continuum that starts with, it's not dictating. The first one is, I'm forgetting the term right now, but it's basically telling consistently, do this, do this, do this. You're standing over the person. That's not the ideal. You want a person who's going to be in quadrant 4 that really is motivated. They know what to do more or less. You can give them responsibility, just check in with them more periodically. So thinking about who could I leverage within my office or even outside of my office to do some of the things, especially the things, I wouldn't say the things that you're not willing to touch because you do need to be involved, but the things that maybe don't speak to your sweet spot or your skill set 100%, that you could move to somebody else and still be involved with, that gives you the resources and mental capacity to do what you're truly gifted to do. Those, I think, will all help you become more productive, because not only will you love your work more, but you'll take a lot of things off the plate that frankly you just don't like, but on top of it, you'll feel like you're making progress. And progress is self-motivating. It's self-perpetuating. When you're in a zone, they call it, there's another term for it. They refer to it as being in flow. Right? When you're in a flow state, that's going to happen. So the more you get into that zone, and take it slowly. One strategy I'll leave you with is think about what's called the Pomodoro technique. And that is block out 30 minutes to do a task. Say for 25 minutes you're going to work, and for 5 minutes you'll take a break. If you do it that way, what happens is you tell your mind, I'm only working on it for 25 minutes. Everything else can wait. That email that just came through, it can wait 25 minutes. That call that just came in, also. Somebody needs your attention, I'll be available soon. Right? So you don't have to feel guilty, you're sort of blocking yourself out, to the world indefinitely. But you're giving yourself meaningful time to get something done. And then you allow yourself a break. You refresh, you revitalize, you can think back to what you did that worked or didn't, and then you take another block of